I got a call Monday night from the postman, Tom Terrific, and he said, "You're speaking Wednesday night. Are you going to be there, and do you have a speech?" And I said, "Why, sure, yes, certainly I have. I'll be there." So I turned to my wife after I hung up the phone and said, "What the hell am I going to speak about?" She had a few suggestions for me. She said, "You could speak about the law." And I thought, well, that's kind of boring. The last speech I gave here was about economics, and I'm wondering if the people are awake yet. So then she said, "Well, why don't you speak about politics?" Yeah, I could do that, but I'm kind of sick. I don't know about you all. I'm kind of sick of politics. I'm ready to vote. I'm ready to vote for Sarah Palin, right? You betcha. How about Joe Biden? I could give a speech on Joe Biden and simply say that the three-letter word that does our economy best is job. Or I could give a short speech about Barack the Messiah Obama. It would be called socialism. Or I could talk about John McCain. You know, he's my friend, yet I've never met him. I don't understand that. So I stumbled across two of the greatest football rivalries, college football rivalries ever. The first is the Missouri-Kansas border war. Now, they used to call it border war, and I'll get into that in a minute. But the University of Missouri and Kansas have played a football game since 1891, every year except 1918, when some epidemic caused the game to be canceled. They called it the rivalry war until recently. Now they call it the border showdown, because in 2004, the athletic director of the Kansas College or University of Kansas decided that that would be perhaps politically incorrect. It would offend people if we called it a war. So let's call it a border showdown. So now we call it a border showdown. Well, my friends, I actually think it's a war. And the war has a couple of interesting elements to it. Kansas coach Don Fambro. You guys remember him, don't you? Anyway, he was sick and dying, apparently, and needed medical treatment that he could only get in Kansas City, Missouri. He refused medical treatment because he refused to travel to Missouri and get treatment there. I'd rather die than go get treated in Missouri. He did. Proving the academic excellence of that university. Norm Stewart, we all remember him. He's the legendary basketball coach for the University of Missouri. Would not let his players eat in Kansas, in Lawrence, when they played a game there. He would stop the bus in Kansas City, Missouri, spend the night in Kansas City, Missouri, fill up the tank in Kansas City, Missouri, so he didn't contribute a dime to the economy of Lawrence, Kansas. God bless him. The war didn't start in 1891, by the way. It started before that. It started in 1863, when a man by the name of William Quantrill decided to take his Missouri bushwhackers, no relation to the current president, over to Kansas and fight the Kansas Jayhawkers. The bushwhackers burned the city of Lawrence. True story. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, they didn't burn it all. And from the ashes sprung a college that they now call the University of Kansas. The other rivalry that I stumbled across was the Notre Dame-Michigan rivalry. And the great thing about that rivalry is it pits the two winningest football programs in the country. Michigan has the highest percentage of victories and the most victories of any team. Second, Notre Dame. They have played 36 contests over the years. Now, they don't play every year like Missouri does or like Yale and Harvard do. Recently, they've been playing every year. Michigan fans can take heart, can take pride. In 1879, Michigan played their first game. It wasn't against Notre Dame, because Notre Dame didn't know how to play football. In 1887, the Michigan players traveled to Notre Dame and taught Notre Dame how to play football. That was their first game. It may also explain why Michigan leads the series 20 wins to 15 wins and 1 tie. There was a gap in that particular series from 1944 to 1977. They didn't play again until 1978, but as we all know now, almost every year we look forward to the Michigan-Notre Dame game. Now you're probably sitting here wondering, what caused him to stumble across these rivalries, these two rivalries, and pick these two rivalries? besides the obvious Mizzou rivalry. Well, as I said earlier, I am kind of fed up with politics. I'm fed up with the polls that are telling us that Obama's going to win. He's 11 points ahead. He's already writing his acceptance speech. And on the other hand, McCain is telling us, I've got the big O right where I want him. Other polls tell us McCain's close. It's going to be a close election. We don't know who's going to win. And by golly, we're right there. And when Sarah Palin's asked, she says, you betcha we're going to win. I frankly don't know who's going to win. I don't. But I'm tired of the predictions, and I'm tired of everyone's opinions, except my own. So I thought to myself, what is a reliable, objective predictor of who's going to win the presidential election? And I actually did some research, and I found it. Literally, religiously, I found it. The game that was played the closest in time to the 1976 elections was Michigan-Notre Dame game that was played closest in time to the 1976 elections, was the 1978 game, as I mentioned. In that game, Michigan beat Notre Dame. In 1976, Jimmy Carter won the presidency. What does that mean? Nothing. Nothing until you look at the rest of the story. 1980, Notre Dame won the football game. Ronald Reagan won the presidency. 1984, Notre Dame won the football game. Ronald Reagan won the presidency. Sound like a broken record. 1988, Notre Dame won the football game. George Bush the number 41, the father of our current president, won the election. 1992 was the one tie. But the game closest played immediately preceding that election was won by Michigan. Bill Clinton won the 1992 election. 1994, the game right before the 1996 election, the game immediately preceding the 1996 election between Michigan and Notre Dame. Michigan won the football game. I had to look at this because I try and forget. Bill Clinton won the election. 2004, Notre Dame won the football game. GW won the election. Since 1976, with one exception, which I'll talk about, when Notre Dame beats Michigan, the Republicans win. It's like God says, when I'm happy, I'll give you a Republican. So what happened in 2000? Well, the game immediately preceding the 2000 game, Michigan won the game. It was a very close election, ladies and gentlemen, my friends. In fact, it was so close, some people, one of them named Al, thinks he actually won the game, or won the election. In fact, maybe God thought so too. So to rectify this problem, because we know the Republican actually won the election in 2000, I looked at the other rivalry, Missouri-Kansas. Did you know that since 1960, the outcome of the Missouri-Kansas game has accurately predicted the winner of the presidential election 60% of the time? It's more than 50, and it's higher than either one of these loony burns are going to get in the election this year, right? So in any event, when Kansas beats Missouri, the Republican is more likely to win the election. So let's look what happened in 2000. Obviously, they played a game in 2000, and Kansas won 38-17, and the Republican won. So what does this tell us? What is the lesson out of all of this, besides the fact that I actually came up with something my wife didn't think I would? Don't pay attention to the polls. Don't pay attention to the pundits. Don't pay attention to the statistics. Not logic. Go with history. Go with God. September 13th, 2008, a little bit more than a month ago, Notre Dame beat Michigan 35-17. What does that tell us? What does that tell us? It tells us that the Republicans are going to win the election. My friends, ladies and gentlemen, if you really want to try and guarantee John McCain a victory this year, you can root for Kansas in this year's border war showdown. But before you get too excited, Alan Kirby,